Welcome to CONVO, a live stream podcast about the intersection of creativity, art, and new technologies. Each month, we bring you 2 episodes featuring compelling and knowledgeable guests who are at the forefront of these exciting fields. I'm your host, Mark Rodito. Let's dive into this episode. My journey into Web3 began with a curiosity about how to use this emerging technology for cultural and creative means. Through my own personal and collective experiments, I have learned a lot in that regard. But as I delve deeper into this world, the collective and collaborative nature of Web3 became ever clearer to me. Our friends at Metalabel calls this creating in multiplayer mode. This led me to DAOs. And for those unfamiliar with this term, DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. In short, DAOs are groups of people or digital communities that work together toward a common goal by sharing resources and making decisions together, all through the help of Web3. Most of the DAOs that I have been a part of are more focused on the creative side of things, such as creating music and artwork to offer later on as NFTs. In this current landscape, multiple DAOs have proliferated, and some stewarding protocol developments while others are closer to a social club. This way of forming and working together is nothing new. Co-ops and collectives have operated in a similar fashion for generations prior to ours. Decentralized organizing and democratic groups have always been thriving outside of Web3. And for me personally, I think it's important to remember that lineage and legacy. Which brings us to today. Multiple DAOs are doing different things. Some even don't call themselves DAOs, but still retain a democratic and decentralized ethos. And despite the current bear market, DAOs and collectives continue to forge ahead, pushing the boundaries of what it means to share resources and do collective work. A long-lasting concept from my Web3 journey is the notion of collective work. How can we enable more of these organizations to proliferate and share their opinions or point of view of the world, whether through a DAO or a digital co-op or maybe even a Metalabel? How can we see more groups creating in multiplayer mode? Our special guest for today is someone whom I consider a mentor and helped shape my thinking about all things collective and community. Everyone, please welcome Austin Robey from Metalabel and Ampled. Austin, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up?
What's up, fam?
I'm happy to be here on Twitch.
Yeah. We were just talking about that earlier, about how there needs to be more Twitch broadcasts for like groups like ours.
Yeah, I've been getting into Twitch more. I have a Twitch app installed on my TV, so I can watch like live streams at home.
Who are your favorite streamers?
I've been watching Joshua Citarella. There's like Meme Mondays. I've been watching some of those
from Do Not Research, right?
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my God. I need to get in on that. I need to watch an episode for sure.
Yeah. I feel like Twitch is becoming more a part of my media diet. It's just more fun. I encourage the, Songcamp to keep going with this. Super cool setup, by the way. Just love the whole setup. It's super cool.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I mean, all of this sort of like overlays and this setup, definitely Peace Note helped, in that regard. Yeah, man. I mean, dude, again, welcome. For people who are not familiar with you or your work or who you are, can you please give us a brief introduction?
Yeah. My name is Austin Robey. I'm a co-founder at Metalabel, which it builds tools and resources for collaboratively releasing work together for cultural collectives and other groups that are expressing their own point of view through releasing work together. Before that, I had helped start a digital cooperative, a platform that was owned by workers and musicians called Ampled, which is just this experiment and seeing if a web platform can be collectively run. And so it was like this, like taking a traditional cooperative model and applying it to the web. Just also, I mean, we started kicking that around in late 2018, I think, and it felt like an idea that I think became pretty interesting to think about in 2020 and was my path towards looking at Web3 as like a sandbox for some of these questions around, the creator economy, collective ownership of web platforms, different types of organizational forms. So yeah, and I'm based in New York, and I've been there for 16 years now.
Where were you originally from?
I'm originally from San Antonio, Texas.
Oh,
and
okay.
I came to Brooklyn to study at Pratt Institute, studying architecture.
Oh shit!
So, yeah. And at one point, I had worked doing fashion design. At one point, I had worked doing product design. So I've it's been like a very nonlinear path, but I think, I kind of like appreciate like multidisciplinary approaches. I think like just like studying design, helps. I think it helps frame interesting like ways to solve problems with constraints. And like more recently, I've just been thinking about that background as like applying that kind of design thinking to like organizational design.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of like an underlooked area for like as a playground. That's one reason why I'm super excited about Songcamp. Songcamp seems like such a like fascinating kind of like bespoke like experiment of people coming together and doing things in like very new ways. So I feel like I'm a fan of Songcamp. I feel like it's helped expand my imagination of what's possible. And so, yeah, I want to just, shout out to everyone that's involved. I talk about Songcamp all the time.
Oh man, that really warms my heart, dude. And I think there's a lot in your DNA too that we resonate and maybe share. You said, you hold that experimental mindset in your projects, right? And then you also said something about the non-linearity and sort of like the multidisciplinary approach that you also hold. I didn't know that you came from an architecture/design background. In my head, I don't know, I thought you came from a nonprofit background,
Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. I didn't know that. That's amazing. I guess this maybe a tangential question, maybe a more personal one too. I noticed you wear, well, at least in some of the podcasts or videos that I saw of you, you wear like band shirts. And some of those band shirts, like, oh, I know this band. This is the band that I used to listen to, like Cro-Mags, for example. And so I'm curious, what's your subcultural background?
I'm wearing a gel shirt. It's band Gel.
Okay. I'm not familiar with them.
I don't know. I guess I just like band shirts. I try to get them at shows. I'm like more personally inclined to like hardcore and punk, like definitely more oriented towards guitar music. I have a desire to discover and get more into electronic music. Like I hear stuff that I like a lot. I just don't I feel like I don't have like any kind of foundational understanding of like how to navigate what define was cool. So I need like a electronic music Sherpa or something, because I want to like expand a bit more. But I think I'm more drawn to like hardcore and punk for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny because like there seems to be a pattern with, or at least in this season, of guests that I've that came on the podcast. Like Dada Bots is one who was really involved in like the Boston like hardcore scene, and then Darby, who is involved with the like Seattle DIY punk scene. And so it's kind of cool to
Peace
sort of
Note.
like Peace Note
Like Peace
also.
Note's a
Yeah.
punk.
Yeah. But yeah, man, that's really cool. And also electronic music. I mean, I have El Ariel on the chats. You should look their music up on Spotify. It's got an 80s vibe to it. And then Gradient too. Much more, maybe I would say, how do I describe your music, Sarmad? But more of like mellow, sort of like down. At least the songs that I've heard of him is like more down tempo. But let me know what you want to hear. I might have some recommendations for you.
Yeah, I asked my friend Sean for some recommendations like last week, and I'm in Berlin now, and I met up with Mikhail from Boiler Room.
Heck yeah.
So he gave me a bunch of recommendations for shows. So I might take a chance and go see something here.
Yeah. No, I mean, dude, since you're in Berlin, and maybe there's like a bucket list of mine for a long time. I want to go to a proper Berlin rave. One that sort of like lasts for like 24 hours. But yeah, that's on my bucket list. But since you're there, dude, there's a lot of like cool shit going on in Berlin for sure.
Yeah. I'll go to one for like 2 hours. That's it.
Yeah. After 2 hours, you need to sit down and sort of like, I feel that. Yeah. So, dude, it sounded like you've been maybe are very much like connected or in the know with a lot of like the subcultural, maybe like scenes, maybe in your youth, maybe now. I wonder how that sort of also informed your thinking in terms of like thinking about collectivity, collective work, Is that something that sort of informed your thinking or
I don't think I'm more informed than the next person. Like I do feel shaped by just the like living in Brooklyn in the like late aughts, early tens. There was a lot of DIY activity going on. A lot of DIY venues, a lot of DIY shows. So I feel like that energy I just have always felt inspired by. Like even like regardless of what kind of music, it is just people that don't care, like don't need anyone's permission to set up an ephemeral venue, set up a show in the basement of a bodega or something like that. Like there was always just like whack-a-mole of venues popping up and getting shut down. And I don't think there were like a tremendous number of like great bands that came from that era. This is like slightly after, say, like the Strokes, slightly after Yeahs, maybe. Like there was like that like early aughts era, but the late aughts era in New York, there's just like a lot of DIY energy in Brooklyn specifically. And I just felt super inspired by that. That was basically just what we would do, like friends in college, going out. It's where I met a lot of the friends that I have today. Some of my best friends I met on MySpace back in the day. I don't, I was like, it was just inspiring being being like in proximity to all that. And so I do feel like that maybe like is a part of my like personal time of just being there that was like, oh, this is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I feel like that's something that at least like some folks who are within our circle sort of share, some of us came from like DIY scenes, some of us came from like art circles and art scenes and all that stuff where there's a specific way of doing, right? You touched on like DIY, do it yourself. There's an evolution of that called DIT, to do it together, where it's like we use the resources that are available to us. Here's what we're into, and here's how we're sharing it to the world, and and whether that's a release or a show, everyone's just happy that they're breaking even, you know what I'm saying? Like, which sort of like maybe dovetails towards like, because I feel like Metalabel shares that too, in terms of like having a perspective of the world, having an opinion and then sharing it through releases. And so maybe for people who are not familiar with Metalabel, like what is a Metalabel? Both in concept and also like as it stands right now as you being part or, of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a Metalabel is something that has existed for a long time. I think we're aiming to give name to something that it has existed before. I would say it's a group of people that come together and release work together to in support of a cultural point of view. It's like a group that more has like a cultural bottom line rather than say like a financial bottom line. And like groups that fit this form, could go all the way back to say like the Royal Society in London, just like a scientific Metalabel of basically, it's creating zines, right? That like challenged the idea of natural knowledge and promoted the ideas that ended up, bringing in the Enlightenment to, groups like Guerrilla Girls, who are an activist art group that formed to have greater, more equitable representation in the art world for women, which, staged protests and created posters and flyers. So I think of, we're not a music specific project. It's important to note that. So our idea of like, say like releases is expansive, thinking that it's just as a poster could be released, just as a zine could be released. We're not thinking that in terms of music. And what we are doing is capital M Metalabel is building tools and infrastructure for existing groups to use and release work together, and as well for new groups to form together and release work.
Dude, I love that. And I also like how you are also tying it to groups that existed before Metalabel with the capital M. I really like the approach of like tying it to a certain lineage or a legacy. Yeah, that's really cool. And maybe to reiterate what a Metalabel is, like I have here something that I pulled off from the website. A Metalabel is a release club where groups of people who share the same interest drop and support work together. It's a lightweight structure that creates economic, emotional, and creative alignment between collaborators. The creator economy is a single player mode. Every creator competing against everyone else for followers and attention. A Metalabel is creativity in multiplayer mode, groups of people pulling skills, audiences, resources in support of a larger creative vision or purpose. And I think when you said that, yes, we are pulling our resources together, as a Metalabel and release joint work together. we are also creating a platform for other meta labels to actually release their own work. And one of them is our collaboration between Songcamp and Metalabel, amongst other collaborations that are also on the pipeline, where Metalabel provided their platform, their infrastructure for us to actually release an art print and tickets to the show.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think that it's a really cool concept. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Songcamp is a meta label, right? Like Songcamp exemplifies this just like as much as you can. Like the idea of creators that I think, largely probably are as solo practices, right?
Mm-hmm.
Coming together, joining their kind of resources, audiences, reach, efforts to creating something that's greater than the sum of their parts.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's super inspiring. And I think that's why people are excited about Songcamp, because it feels like you can imagine, like, what is the Songcamp for newsletter writers? Like, what is the Songcamp version for podcasters?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah, I think creating tools, and allowing people to join together, just like you all have, feels like it's a timely moment for that, where the kind of current creator economy has felt very isolating and individualistic, and we do feel like we're competing with each other for attention, for views, for likes, and like none of this is compatible with the way that any creative practice actually should function. So I think the way that the Songcamp is kind of creating their own world is super cool. So a different approach to being a creative person online is really like the big picture, right? Like thinking about work in terms of collaborative drop rather than kind of everyone on their solo treadmill is, I think where it's a constructive place where a future kind of creator economy could go.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it reminds me of, other projects from our peers, like Channel, for example. I believe I'm getting that right. I was just saying that it reminds me of this project Channel, with Matt Tryhurst, who else is on there? New Models. They pulled their resources and made this project such that, they could pull their audiences, their resources, and then offer that as a sort of like, here's all of us joining together. And to me, that's powerful, and expands their reach also. And especially because I would like to think also that the audiences, there's already overlap in both concept and thought and opinions, so it makes sense to actually sort of pull resources and yeah.
Channel's super cool. A super cool concept of tools for podcasters, I think, specifically to work together and to have this kind of like intermediary free version of membership and patronage, which is super exciting. So I would put like the ideas behind Channel up there with Songcamp as like, these are the things that get me excited or allow me to see like cool potentials and opportunities within Web3.
I agree, dude. So we talked about Channel. I wonder if there, from your point of view, other meta labels out in the wild, and if so, what are their attributes? Like what do they share?
Yeah, we have like a growing list of ones on our website. If you click on Metalabel.xyz magazine and then Spotted, we highlight all these different groups that exemplify a kind of Metalabel form that we've spotted in the wild. So what are some of these? I think like, not purely Web3 focused, but I think like Water and Music is a great one of people coming together to release these collaborative music reports. I mentioned Gorilla Girls as well, and Royal Society. Yeah, there's, I think we have like over 30 groups that we've identified in some way as like exemplifying this form. And the thing that would tie them together is like, there is a common purpose, right? There's like a purpose that brings these groups together and are expressing these views through drops, through releases. And releases, again, could be viewed through the lens of like any form of media. But the releases are kind of what pushes this cultural point of view. And each one of these groups kind of has their own rules of participation, how they work together. That is the most flexible part, right? But I think having this like this worldview to express and doing that through releases is how we define what is like a common attribute that Metalabels would share.
Yeah. You mentioned releases and you mentioned drops, and and all of these are like shared, like collectively, and just like putting out into the world as like one identity. On the Metalabel side, you have this thing called records, which at least from how I'm understanding it is a release. I'll read a pulled quote from the article Reinventing the Record. In almost every creative and cultural medium, physical formats with a clear, tangible value have been replaced with digital experiences that obfuscate paying for things directly, ultimately devaluing creative work. The modern digital experience is too convenient and powerful for these changes to roll back. But the struggles of creative people trying to make ends meet under this new regime aren't going away either. What we need now is a new and compelling form of exchange between creators and audiences. Do you want to add more to that?
Yeah, we are introducing this, it's a little bit of a play, since Metalabel is like thinking about creative work through like abstracting what a label is and what a label does, right? Of like supporting the kind of like creation and distribution of creative work, like bringing on talent and like curating this kind of like coherent aesthetic point of view, right? And what do Metalabels do? They release records. A record is like, thinking of it as like a format that does run like is anchored on chain, like using Web3 Rails. And it's thinking of a record as like one, a recording of a work's existence, right? And two is like a container of media. So like a record itself like is a flexible format. So you could think of like a record, just like an album would have like many forms of media on it. Thinking about collecting, like telling a story through a collection of curated media as a record. So like an example of this, we helped Gitcoin release this record celebrating quadratic funding recently. And that felt exciting to see this format as like a way to celebrate a concept or an idea. And Gitcoin used this record. There's several media within it. There's like a re-release of an original quadratic funding white paper co-authored by Zoe Hitzig and Glenn Weil and Vitalik Buterin, and as well as a poem about quadratic funding. This is something that Gitcoin uses for their grant matching pools, and then just like a kind of like updated like commentary from Kevin Owocki, another co-founder of Gitcoin. So all of this media together is like in this package, and the package is celebrating this concept, it's celebrating this idea. So we're helping groups release all kinds of work through this record format. So we're excited to see what direction people go with it. But I really like this kind of Gitcoin example that was released recently of like, this is a format to celebrate an idea. You can, and Gitcoin had used a funding split to fund grant matching pools and the Plurality Institute. And so I think it's like also just interesting, just as Songcamp has done, to like use a kind of payment split to also help tell a story, right? It's like another reason to support something.
Yeah. I love, dude, it's the thing that comes to mind is like taking on that label, maybe analogy, reissues. To me, it's like a reissue, but now with like on 180 gram vinyl, colored, you know what I'm saying? Like with signature from the artist, you know what I'm saying? Like that to me is what the quadratic funding drop felt like, And it's really cool.
Yeah. It's like reissuing something that's like born digital, like something that's internet native. And that was like celebrating a piece of internet history in a way.
Yes. Yeah, totally. And, these releases are part of I think what Metalabel calls a quality drop, Is there what's the thinking behind a quality drop, and what is a quality drop?
Well, I mean, so the Gitcoin was the first release that we had helped another group release through us. Songcamp and Catalog was number 2. This is part of an initiative we're calling Quality Drops. I think it's like we often hear things in these like seasonal containers, like season 1, season 2. I think for this, it's like quality drops are like, it's a container for us. It's a way, it's like, these are kind of releases that we are handpicking, that we are co-producing. So like before tooling becomes kind of public and open, it's really just curating cool meta labels with cool stories to tell that are using this like record format in an interesting way, and working with them. So like kind of being we've actually kind of even thought of our roles as A&R.
I love that.
Of like finding cool groups and working with them so that a project or release is successful.
Yeah. I remember when we were working on the latest quality drop release, it was just an idea. I think that was also hot off the heels of the recent quadratic funding drop. And I remember in our DMs, I believe you brought up that idea, or I don't remember now who brought up the idea. It's like, yeah, let's release it, And to me, something really clicked there, because like the work of a label really is to sort of like contextualize a release, along with all the admin work too. But it puts it in a certain context, and I think to me that's what personally, from my point of view, that's what the collaboration looked like. Yes, we have this drop or this release, coming, but then Metalabel offered a certain a container for it of sorts, a way of presenting it, a way of contextualizing this release along with others. And so,
yeah, and it was also something that you did with catalog, right? So I think if given a convenient, cool way to do collaborations like that, I feel like that could be useful for groups. And yeah, so like thinking about a Songcamp releasing with catalog, like think about any solo creators that just join together, say like for one release. That's also cool. So yeah, I see this as like a way for almost any group to form a release club, right? To like have a means of releasing work in collaborative ways, and also like a collaboration garden too.
I love that.
Like you want to work with another group to drop something cool, like form a meta label to do that.
Yeah. Totally. And yeah, I mean, now looking back at our, collaboration, there's a lot that goes on behind it too. And I'm pretty sure when you were working with Gitcoin also on the recent drop, there was a lot of like behind the scenes coordination work that goes in there. Oh, where are the assets? How do we frame this? How do we put language in this? And it's both thrilling and chaotic at the same time too. I don't know if you feel that way.
Yeah. Like, I think any like cool creative project where the stakes feel high enough, or it's chaos.
It's chaos. Yeah, totally. And I'm just reminded of the Chaos Project, but also like whenever we do releases in Songcamp, and there's always that element of chaos of like, yes, there is one half of it is like, yes, there is a plan, we know what to do, but then there's another half that's just like feels very emergent and feels very much like, there are some moments where I personally feel like we're building a plane like in midair sort of thing, which, I mean, you can argue that is also the creative process, but yeah, I guess where I'm at right now is that I've embraced that as this part of working collaboratively together, Yeah,
I mean, I think the one thing that I love about Songcamp so much is like the creative approach to not only songwriting, but the means of distribution and just completely new ways of coming together. Like creating your own rules, your own world, your own platform. Like that's super creative. And yeah, I think like these kinds of like smaller experiments that are very bespoke, just incredible. And also Songcamp is also like very geared towards this drop mentality.
Yeah.
Right. There's drops, like a release could be a songwriting camp. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, Chaos, that was the third drop from Songcamp, right?
Correct.
Super cool. I feel like I talk about it all the time.
I appreciate you talking about it all the time. And same for Metalabel too. Whenever I get asked, from like other creative circles, oh, what's a good example of like a collective project? Check out what Metalabel is doing. Going back to drops and releases. Late last year, Metalabel released a zine called After the Creator Economy, which you are now sort of like doing a tour of sorts, a speaking tour of sorts, Can you tell us about that project? I have my copy around here somewhere, but
Yeah, I have one here. I have this
oh, there you
thing
go.
here. Yeah, this it was a zine, and then it kind of became book length almost. So it's formatted like a zine, but it ended up getting so big that it has a spine.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was like we are as a group, as capital M Metalabel, we are also operating in this kind of drop format. So this was our sixth release, like our sixth kind of native release. So first one was an essay. Second one was like a standalone web app. Third one was a cohort where called Assembly, where cultural collectives would meet and kind of like kind of like this cohort co-learning.
I was part of that. I really enjoyed my time there. Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. I really love that too. And yeah, we also had a release that was a like our own kind of publishing platform that we have on Metalabel called Public Record, and then a Discord app as well that lets people tweet together called Chorus. And so this book was number 6, and this was the first one that we released as a record that people could collect and claim a physical version. And yeah, I love this zine project of After the Creator Economy because it looks beautiful. I have to give a shout out to Ilya who designed it as part of Metalabel. And one, it was a very collaborative project. The contents of the zine hint at where we should go with kind of in the next version of a creative ecosystem that is more beneficial, that is more collaborative, that is more democratic, it's more fair, that preserves, that empowers content creators. And then I felt like it was like a cool, rich drop because the way that we released it as a record helped kind of demonstrate some of those ideas, like through not only writing about it, but helping demonstrate some different alternatives for ways of creating and producing, distributing, monetizing creative work online. And so I'm in Berlin now. We just kind of presented it at Trust in Berlin. It was labeled a book launch, but the book sold out in one day, and that was in December. So it's not actually a book launch. It's more of like a celebration and presentation of it. And we'll be doing another one on Tuesday in London at Protein. So it'll be me from Metalabel and Severin from Comatter, who is like a partner with us on this drop.
Wow. Yeah. That's so cool, man. That's so cool. Yeah. I love when you said that the After the Creator Economy project was demonstrating how to work together and then also publishing and presenting it also together, which feels very meta. It's like you're showing it how it's done. You know what I'm saying? You're showing it how it's done. Like the process is collaborative, and then also the mode of release was also collaborative. And so that's really cool. I think
we had this. We had a splits contract made for this that had a recoup model. So printing all of the copies of the zine took some upfront money, about like $3,000. And so there was like a waterfall that recouped that amount that was paid before the actual production, and then split among 30 plus contributors, people that helped in big ways and small, and even people that just had quotes pulled from them. So it was like a way to kind of just like acknowledge kind of lineage of thought in some ways. So yeah. So the funding got distributed to all the people that helped create it. And I like, that is something that I think was definitely inspired by the Chaos Project.
Wow. That's humbling to hear. Yeah. And then also, definitely flattering. Yeah, dude, that's really cool. Are there any maybe key like takeaways from you on your end, from that project, from the zine itself, or maybe from the content of it, that's sort of like, oh yeah, I think this is it, sort of thing?
There's many takeaways. I think one of the takeaways that felt the most like fresh and timely and urgent is, we highlighted several concepts. There's Kyle Chayka talked about algorithmic anxiety, some of the like emotional burdens that we feel creating work online. So a lot of the takeaways and focus of the book are really it's not like a quantitative report. It's like, how does it feel to be a creative person online? And where do we go from here? I think one of the like technical drawbacks of the current kind of creator economy and platform landscape was this idea of platform risk, which we interviewed Matt Dryhurst about. That feels like a very interesting takeaway to me from that, of thinking about that as like a more serious challenge of, putting work onto platforms that could just disappear, or that could change ownership, or that could just change policy, that could be mismanaged, that could, what happens to our work? We kind of like trust that platforms will be around, but we see now that like, content on Vine doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Over a decade of music on MySpace was just erased.
It's gone. Yeah.
I tried to find music that I made in high school on Pure Volume.
Pure Volume.
And that's gone. It's like now like a clickbait farm. So there, and if you're on Twitter, you probably like have been thinking this could be gone at any second. Right.
Yeah.
So it does feel like a question of thinking about how can we be resilient against this platform risk, right? Especially for content that is digital native, like maybe without any analog counterpart. So it feels like this kind of precarious, fragile thing that we often don't consider. And I think like our view of maybe one of the key use cases for anything crypto related is actually just putting media on chain. Archiving, preserving media, putting it on this kind of public distributed computer may not be the full solution, but I think does help protect media in some sense from platform risk.
Yeah. I mean, when you were sharing about platform risk, certainly that's something that I also think about too. What happens to this like body of work that we're uploading into, say, a platform, right? And what came to mind for me was the recent news with Spotify. I don't know what feature it is, but I think the TLDR there is that it's going to operate a little more like TikTok, where it's just, you have like little bits of the song. It's not exactly platform risk, but to me, it's like, because we rely so much in this sort of like platform that we are almost at, like we're under their control in terms of like, oh, we're going to roll out this feature, whether you like it or not, sort of thing. And when I found that news, I found myself I guess my initial reaction was like that of like, well, annoyance, frustration, anger, and sort of like, like the musicians who are actually providing content for this app have no say at all, with all these like feature releases, would it help them? Maybe, but I don't know, man. Like it's really,
well, there's two sides to that. Like
okay.
The platformer has gone like the technical media side would be like, yeah, ways to preserve it so that you're not reliant on pure volume, right? To like be like a custodian of some like body of anthropological cultural work. But then that's also the other question of co-ownership and co-governance and co-determination and having some say in governance. Like I always I have felt like some of the kind of demands of like Union of Musicians and Allied Workers towards Spotify to raise the streaming payments like to a penny just haven't really gone anywhere. And I think it may risk just like accepting the premise of the streaming model itself, and instead should be asking for governance rights, like pressuring investors for a seat on the board, like an ownership trust within Spotify, or Bandcamp was sold to Epic Games, so I think like that's a level of platform risk too. You have no idea what now independent music is basically as a whole trusting kind of like something that feels so important that it should be a utility to the company that makes Fortnite. Like, so how do we protect that? I think we have to just get better at asking it for the right things. And when Bandcamp was doing Bandcamp Fridays, I think instead of all rejoicing, we should have like maybe worked to hold Bandcamp accountable.
Yeah. I agree. That Bandcamp example, well, at least to me, the way that I perceive Bandcamp, it was like the last bastion of independent music, right? And for a long time, they held that, and that's probably why a lot of people love purchasing through Bandcamp. But man, when I saw in my email that the Bandcamp email, and then the email name switching to Bandcamp, an epic company, it's corny as hell. But it's like, oh shit, like end of an era, dude. For sure.
Yeah.
But
the workers just unionized there, which is interesting. I'm curious to see what happens there.
I've seen that too. Are you in the know of like what's going on with that whole unionizing? Okay.
No.
Yeah. Well, let's see how that goes. Maybe there's a good segue too, because we're talking about platforms. We're talking about, music, we're talking about supporting artists and having a seat at the table. You are part of Ampled, and if I could just like read a brief maybe overview of what Ampled is. Ampled is a patron-like platform for musicians owned by its artists and workers. Ampled allows artists to be directly supported by their community without intermediaries or gatekeepers, and is collectively owned by its artists and workers. And so it's a great project. I'm curious, like, what are the origins of it, and what sort of like is the vision, of it, in its inception.
Yeah, I mean, the origin was, it started from something as simple as asking a question with friends of, oh, Patreon seems like an interesting model. It seems nominally better than existing patronage models, in that it can give you predictable recurring income, which is like, that is important. That is something that's like often completely missing.
Yes.
And can we make something that doesn't give people nerd chills like Patreon does, and something that's just specifically for musicians? and that it really would like turn into almost like a research project of how to make something that is that can be trusted, that doesn't just rely on goodwill, is like has like a trust built into its structure.
Yes.
And that led to ideas of co-ownership, shared ownership. That led to research of cooperatives, and then becoming a co-op. And so what that means is one member, one share, one vote. There's no investor ownership of Ampled at all. It's, artists that get 10 supporters can become an artist owner, and anyone working, across the globe. There's people that had worked at Spotify or Patreon or Kickstarter. So if someone contributes for 40 hours, then they can become a worker owner. We have bylaws that explain all the, rights and responsibilities, the kind of like financial rights, the governance rights of each kind of membership class. With cartoons, there's cartoons in the bylaws too. They're like made to be very readable. And I think the project, the goal of it kind of shifted over time, because it, there is the goal of like driving, meaningful, life-changing money, whatever, that's different for everybody, to artists, but then also just it kind of became a way that can just inspire people and expand imagination of just like what a creative ecosystem or online creative ecosystem can look like. Like you start to imagine what would a cooperative version of X platform look like. And that's, so Ampled is based in this like platform cooperative movement, which, there's several other groups, like Stocksy is based in Vancouver. They're a stock photography platform that's owned collectively by the photographers. There is Drivers Cooperative in New York, which is like a Uber alternative owned by drivers. And so the bigger idea is actually just thinking about rewiring our entire economy, like towards worker ownership and orienting our relationship to the services that we use and rely on, so that the organizations and tools that we actually provide value to, that we can capture that. It's not extracted from us. We're not exploited. So we can protect ourselves from that. We can capture the upside. Like Patreon worth, I don't know how much it's worth, but a lot. I think like maybe $1 billion or more. What's that worth without the creators? Of course there's value in that's being generated by the creators. Or what's the value of Spotify without any musicians as stakeholders? And so there's a lot of value that's being generated, say like, even when you post photos on Instagram, like without people doing that, the platform wouldn't be worth anything. So yeah, rethinking like us as users, as content generators, as people that are providing the value of capturing that. So that's a bigger idea. And I think that like the real goal is like, really, can we just move Overton's window a bit? Can we just make a dent in what people view as possible? And I think that, if a project like that can inspire hundreds or thousands of people to maybe make the next business that incorporates some of these ideas and has more kind of like downstream effects, I think like just thinking of us as like one stepping stone, as like one kind of precedent that can get us towards like a more fair or more equitable creative economy is like where I would see this like being successful.
Yeah. I love it. It's like, I love it when you said it's setting a precedent. It's showing how it could be, in the future, and hoping also that others could actually take inspiration from it and apply it to like other maybe domains or expressions. I'm curious about, because you mentioned, this being, say, a business. And typically businesses have their investors. And so how does that look like in a co-op setting? Where does the resources come from? Are the members actually pulling their resources together to bootstrap this thing? Like, what does it look like?
I mean, I don't think Ample has figured this out because we have always just felt so under-resourced. But what we did do is create our own fundraising terms using revenue-based financing.
Okay.
So that's debt instead of selling equity, which is to say purchasing a tiny fraction of top line revenue, which would get paid back until the investor receives 3x on their investment, which could take it could take a really long time. And then after that, the obligation's over. So it's kind of like a different relationship to an investment of something that like, well, you'll get paid back some, right? It won't be a kind of moonshot, like rocket, like 100x return, but it's also like very friendly to a company that's older selling equity, and like because it's like a percentage of revenue rather than say like debt with interest, it can be more friendly. So we did some revenue-based financing from friends and supporters in the project, and then as well like kind of treated labor as an investment. We have a model that again kind of led me to explore Web3, which was a time bank. So like time banking is like it's like used in kind of like solidarity networks. I feel like in like anarchist networks a lot of times of like, it's a way for people to log kind of like time given to something, and you can exchange time as well. So like every single week, everyone working on the project got a prompt to enter a self-report how many hours they had put in. And once you got to a certain amount of hours, then you're eligible to become a worker owner. And so we have this log of hours since the beginning of the project of every single person that's contributed to it and how many hours they put in. And the idea is, well, if Ample becomes financially successful, then we could maybe do, instead of share buybacks or stock buybacks, we do time buybacks. So like the time that you put in, you can get like the company, the co-op can buy back the hours that you had invested early on. That was like, I had to get creative. Like, and I think like these problems are not really solved on how to capitalize cooperatives. And so this again feels like something that, like really just looking for like any model that can help like a creative project that is not financially optimized exist and be better resource, I think is something to say yes to. And so that feels like a key interest to me now, because I don't want cool projects to just die on the vine, or feel like they're kind of like forced to adopt like a financially optimized kind of path forward. So yeah, I mean, ask someone how to start and fund a cooperative, and no one will give you an answer, right? There's almost like no rule book, especially when it comes to platforms, which are really expensive and like tough to create and like really hard to bootstrap.
Yeah. Have you seen, so with your experience running co-ops, have you seen any DAO models or playbooks out in the wild that sort of like could maybe help that in terms of like resourcing, while also maintaining a sense of like ownership and I guess responsibility to the members? Is that something that in your journey sort of like, oh, I think that could be a good model that can be applied, or not really?
I think I've seen a lot of interesting like parts of projects, like different elements to take from different groups. Friends with Benefits is interesting. I think any group that treats like an NFT as like a vote or a membership, like you start to hint at those same concepts, right? And so there's something interesting. I mean, the only thing that really defines a cooperative is one member, one vote. Like that is like the defining characteristic of it. And so I see a lot of projects that actually do adopt models like that. So I do find that kind of inherently interesting.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think for the Chaos Project too, we sort of adopted that same model in terms of our governance process, even though the Chaos tokens may differ from each member, their allocations, when we're making a decision, it's one member, one vote. And it certainly has a lot of benefits to it, and also challenges as well, And I wonder from your perspective, were there any challenges, like say running a cooperative, a platform cooperative? Like, what are those? And
Yes.
what's on top of mind in terms of that?
Like easy answer, funding is like number one. I think it's like, it's tough to rely on like sustained bootstrapping of labor. That's difficult to maintain long term. So yeah, I mean, I think that's like some of the top ones. I mean, it also was just a challenge, kind of like you said, of building the airplane like while you're in the air. Of like, it's hard enough to kind of like create like something that people want to use. Right. But like having to feel the pressure of also rewriting the rules at the same time as you're looking to build something is a challenge too. Like, I think in order to do anything outside of the box, you have to like learn a lot about corporate law and like a lot of information about how fundraising works. And it's like, you have to learn the rules in order to bend them. And I think that's like just true across the board. It's not just about like starting a co-op. So yeah, I mean, that's a challenge. I think it's a challenge that like presents a lot of cool creative opportunities, right? That's like,
right.
I think part of the cool thing about Songcamp and the various drops is like you like as a group kind of like understanding a suite of tools and what's possible, and then putting them together in unique ways that help serve like the collective interest.
Yeah. No, you're right, dude. I think that's a great observation, and I think I see it in our other peers too, or neighboring communities and collectives, where here's an idea, here's a tool. How can we sort of like shape this tool into something that would benefit us and our members? And I find that, speaking from the Songcamp side, there are projects or drops that we feel like, oh, that was great as an experiment, but later on we find like, oh, this is not optimal for what we want to do. And so I think going back to releases and drops, I feel like that format of experimentation per drop is hopefully a good way to actually find something that truly works, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, Songcamp is like, what's been cool to follow along is I think each drop that Songcamp has done has become more and more ambitious and more honed in. And it like, as it, I feel like everything that Songcamp does is promoting like a more imaginative and collaborative way of producing music. And and novel ways of distributing and kind of like value capture. And like right, it seems like every single drop from the last 3 has gotten more ambitious. It's like better articulated what the purpose of Songcamp is, and more people are interested in it. So I just like, yeah, I mean, like, what's it going to be like by the 5th or 6th drop? You know, it's like, I would imagine that there's like room to do some really big things at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And I think the collectives that we're a part of are also learning organizations. It's almost like also we're part experimenters, but also part research group too, where it's like, you know, with research, you're searching for answers, and also a part of that research is also to apply it, to actually see for yourself, is this truly working? Is this experiment working? Sometimes it does work, sometimes it doesn't, you know, and that's okay, you know, which I think is also something that we were talking about too, you know, before we recorded this podcast. It's like, yeah, we see these things as experiments, rather than here's what it is. Here it is, you know. It's not, you know. But yeah, they're just like,
yeah, I think like, you know, like, yeah, I think that's like, again, I just keep talking about Songcamp, but I think like that's the beautiful thing about like what Songcamp is done is like, it's an experiment. And it might not work, right? I'm sure that's like the approach. Like, this might not work. You know, like, if I think about a 77-person band, there's a lot of ways that could not work. Like, you know, people would be like, well, there's no way you could actually do that, produce music that quickly, have it be good quality, that people would care enough about it. And I think like it proved all of that wrong. But yeah, it's like, yeah, it's like, it's brave. It takes guts to do that. And it is like, it is an experiment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that. You know, I think that really is very encouraging. Yeah, man. So, you know, we've known each other for maybe more than a year now, perhaps. You know, I'm following your work through various publications. And also, we've been members of DAOs too, both of us, you know. I remember when you had the dinner DAO project, and I believe your role there was more of a community sort of like growth sort of like role, and I just really admired like how, I guess, there's this lineage, or there's this through line from all these projects that you've been involved with, that is community centered and community focused, or you know, there's a sense of collectivity, you know. And so yeah, dude, like in this, when I was preparing for the show, I was listening to a podcast, I believe it was the CMX podcast or something, where you said community is the product, you know. And I think, I don't remember what the context is, but I find myself getting curious, like, okay, what does that look like in practice if the community is the product?
Maybe I have evolved my views since then.
Well, share with me your updated views.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that when people say community is the product, and I don't recall the context from that, I feel like that's, you know, you think of like FWB as like, you know, it is a community, it's the network, right?
Yes.
So there is value to like this kind of like shared camaraderie, shared like space, shared interactions. But I think there's beyond like I feel like a community needs to actually produce work. And so like I think that the output of a community is probably where most of the value ends up coming from, rather than just there being a community. So yeah, I think that's like what Metalabel hints at, is like a focus on releases, right? And yeah, I don't know. This is like maybe a personal view, but I'm less excited about groups that talk about vibes. Like, I'm not necessarily anti vibes, although that would be a fun position to take. Um, but yeah, like Songcamp is held together by doing stuff, by like creating the songwriting camps, like just as much as like, like people bond together because like, I think the best friendships are made through like working on a creative project together. And that's probably what actually holds Songcamp together, or like any kind of creative group.
1,000% agree. Yeah. When you do shit together, definitely that's a bonding moment, because it's also, especially in creative context, right? Where, so say for example, music, it's vulnerable, dude. Like if you and I were collaborating on music, and I share with you my idea of how this sounds like, and you're like, no, hell no, dude, no, it's sort of like, oh shit, okay, it's vulnerable, and I think that sense of vulnerability actually binds folks together. And that back and forth, right? That dance when you're actually making something together, is truly something that, again, it binds us, Yeah. Speaking of, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say about Dinner DAO was like this thing that I kind of just started as like a test of just DAO tools. I don't think Dinner DAO is active anymore, to be honest. I think everybody wants to eat dinner, but nobody wants to run a DAO. This is what I learned. It was a fun experiment, and met some really great friends through that. But it's I think the like common thread is just like it's these kinds of like cultural or social applications of just like having fun, not taking it too seriously, is something that I've just been attracted to. But yeah, Dinner DAO is not something that I really even talk about, but it's like it was a fun experiment, right? Sort of like several chapters throughout different cities, and
I was part of the LA.
And a lot of people became friends through that. But I have to check if it's still active. I don't even really check.
I mean,
the Discord anymore.
The ROI of that DAO are the friends we made along the way. That's definitely for sure. Yeah. Speaking of DAOs, I heard you got thoughts. I heard you got, I have it saved here too, also on my Twitter, about your opinions on the Nouns DAO model, and on the multiple tweets, you're sort of like poking at like, is this truly it? Especially in the context of creative work, or creative joint work. Is this truly it? And so I wonder if you could maybe expound more about your thoughts on the Nouns DAO model, how it's helpful, how it's not, and I wonder if there are any potential maybe solutions or feature sets that could be like helpful for that model.
Yeah, well, just disclaimer, like personal views. I'm just asking questions. I think it's like a nuanced thing. It's also like a question of how many people actually care about this debate. Something that I'm not even really sure of. But yeah, I mean, there is a distinction. I like Nouns DAO didn't necessarily speak to me very much, but I dug in to learn more. I know a lot of people are very fascinated by it and see it as like a model with like much bigger potential. And I agree with all that. It is super interesting. There's a distinction between Nouns DAO, like the original, like main one, the Nouns protocol, and what's possible using that. And noun-ish DAOs, which are like the baby DAOs that are using this logic. And I guess what I would say is that just like the defining feature of a co-op is one member, one vote. It's interesting because like nouns is also one member, one vote, but the thing that defines nouns is the auction mechanism. Like it's very opinionated about purchasing a membership through an auction. And I think like there's nothing wrong with these explorations in crypto of like you can design any kind of organizational system, right? And like these can be fun experiments, and that's like there's nothing wrong with that. That's like oftentimes like super cool and inspiring just to see what people do. My question or doubts are like people taking that model and extrapolating and saying this is the ideal form factor for cultural production. That's where I disagree. And I think that auction mechanic doesn't work for groups that have like a cultural point of view at the center of what they're doing. To me, it feels like a method for treasury creation rather than cultural creation, and those are not the same things. And so here's the nuance, though, is like using the nouns protocol, you can make super interesting kind of like multi-stakeholder groups. And I think like, I think of Ample has, besides artist owners and worker owners, a stakeholder class called community members. And those are people that support the platform through the community page for $3 a month or more. So like, I've always seen this as important to allow people to support a project with money if they want, and giving those people like governance say. Because I think that's like actually like an important voice. People that want to support this thing, they might not be a musician, right? They might not have time to commit to the project, but they want to support it. And I kind of see the value of NounsDAO as like creating one of those kinds of financial stakeholders within existing organizations that already have ways to participate outside of just money, right? But it so my like critique or questions are just like, yes, interesting model, simple, which is like pretty nice. I have questions about it being a model for cultural production because of the kind of reliance on the financial option. I see that as like a filter that doesn't necessarily work for cultural production. And I see it as really good for building treasuries, potentially, like as it stands now, but not as good for developing like a membership logic that actually reflects the realities of kind of the different kinds of stakeholders that exist within cultural projects, right? So if you couldn't make a Songcamp based on people buying their way into the band, but maybe there's a way that like using a nouns protocol could allow like financial supporters to like start to participate in this model. So I don't think that the model is necessarily bad. I don't think NounsDAO is bad. I think it's interesting. But I do disagree that it's just like allowing people to buy in and then have a say based on having the most money does not feel like the ideal form factor for cultural production. And it's been surprising to me that I don't feel like that's like a controversial take. It's just like from the research I did, I was like, oh, that's just what stuck out to me. And I've had a lot of people like DM me that they agree with this. I just found it kind of interesting that very few people have like even articulated a counter position to it. And that's kind of like the only reason why I said anything was because I just kind of like saw this like gap of this absence of people even having any other position on it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think the nuance there, maybe like the takeaway for me is like, because I was also like watching and observing like Nouns DAO model. Some of my peers are fans of it. But then one thing that was unclear to me was like, is this good for like creative production? Creative cultural production. And that was unknown to me until you actually sort of like pointed it out or asked questions in your tweet. And so yeah, hearing you expound on that and add more nuance to it, I think is truly very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, like, yeah, I support groups that get creative with the model. So I don't want to imply that like I view Nouns DAO as inherently bad. I think it just deserves maybe like an extra level of like, like adding an extra kind of like thought to like the membership logic that can exist within this kind of group. So I think there's ways to situate the Nouns DAO logic perfectly well within like a group that is largely like based around cultural production. But over reliance on the auction mechanism, I think like does more damage than good.
Yeah. Context is important, in these tools. And obviously, the tools available to us are not a panacea. It's like it doesn't cover all. I think, to me personally, I think it's on us to actually test and experiment with these tools if truly it works for our purposes. And if not, that's okay.
Yeah, there is like maybe a conflation sometimes with, again, like building a treasury and building culture. Like I just ask myself, like, would people put Noggles in a cartoon or on a shirt if there wasn't like a large financial bounty as like a freelancer working to propagate a meme? So yeah, I just like, is that culture or is that like a gig economy? I'm not sure how it, and maybe I just don't understand the model or kind of like the original group as much, but from my like outsider perspective, like I don't see as much of that intrinsic like motivation to propagate the meme. It's it does seem kind of like a project that is like based around financial incentives. These views are weakly held. I could be swayed by like an argument the other way, and I don't even really like think about it so much. I just like, these are just like the questions that I ask myself, and I think it's worth asking that because I just didn't see a lot of people thinking that much about it. I just saw a lot of people wanting to adopt the model kind of like without that much like critique of it.
Yeah, and I think that's healthy. I think that's healthy and necessary. For our tools to evolve too. Critique is important, and also like I also appreciate that you also hold these ideas or these opinions lightly as well. Yeah, dude. Let's switch to lightning round. This has been very much a just a packed episode. There's a lot of like, just hearing you talk about Metalabel and Ample, your experiences with DAOs and co-ops. But first, before we go to the lightning round, I wonder if there are any questions in the chat. Just scrolling up here, I see that Sarmad had a question. Can we start a Spotify DAO like Constitution DAO, except it's to make Spotify cool again?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be billions though. Billions in funding to actually get that started, buying them out. Yeah.
Yeah. I did like I wrote an article in 2020 about like more are ways to explore collective ownership of Spotify and like some practical baby steps of ways to achieve that, of like ownership trust, or even just having like proxy artist seats on a board of directors. So I think there are ways to, I think, practically achieve some kind of influence over Spotify, but no DAO is going to be able to buy out Spotify worth tens of billions of dollars.
Yeah.
But we can try. I mean, that sounds like more fun than Constitution DAO.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Cool. Let's switch to lightning round. You can answer these. These questions are not really like lightning round. You are free to answer them for as long as you want. But here it is. Paint a picture of what the future looks like.
In a lightning round? Let's see. I'd like to see a future with more collaborative, like creators joining together in kind of like every discipline. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see just like a culture trending towards more collectivism rather than individualism.
Wonderful. Yeah. What are you currently spinning?
Gel, the shirt that I have on. There, I think there are 3 singles from an upcoming album, and they're so good. Yeah, so I'd recommend Gel. Super good, hardcore. And there's this really good video, like a Hate 5-6 like live concert video of them playing it in a Sonic in New Jersey, like outside, like a Sonic drive-in. So I like just watch that video and then you'll see why they're amazing.
Sick. Gel, GEL, right? I'm gonna look that up.
Right.
What's something that brought you joy recently?
Well, I'm in Berlin now. I took like a really long walk today. I got a coffee and took a long walk and explored a neighborhood that I've never been in. Like, that's just like the best way to spend a morning.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds very calming and also almost like an adventure, you know? Yeah. Especially at a place where you're not familiar with. That's really cool. Well, knowing what you know now, what will you tell your younger self?
Man, that's cheating. It's like, be like, yeah, I don't know. I like would not want to relive my 20s at all. That was too hard. So I don't know. I think like learn to code. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I wouldn't I think I would just like say it's okay. It's gonna be okay.
Wonderful. Yeah. It's gonna be okay. Here's the last question. Well, maybe to give you context, the overarching theme of this podcast is 21st century creativity. And we define it in different ways, but in your own words, what does 21st century creativity look like?
Well, I know this is a lightning round, but I think we're at a shift, like a generational shift away from neoliberal individualism. And I'm excited to see that as like the next. I think it'll take like decades or even like a century to unlearn some of these practices. So, like in 2020 or 2019, it's a few years ago, the Turner Prize, like a prestigious art award in the UK, was shortlisted all collectives for the first time in its history. And that to me feels like a shift, like the beginning of a shift towards like thinking about creativity and arts practices differently. Something that like, when you think about like the kind of like artistic creative heroes of the last century, like they're all individual people's names. And I'd like for the next century to be like less of this myth of the lone heroic genius and more of like more of thinking about groups of people that did stuff together. Yeah. So like in many forms, I just think like a shift away from this individualism is like what I would like to see like in the next century. It's going to take a lot of just like unlearning, rethinking cultural values. And I think I'm like largely optimistic, but see some of these things taking a long time.
Yeah. Well put. Dude, what's on the horizon for you? What's coming up? Anything that you want to promote or share to our audience?
I would say look out on Wednesday for another Metalabel drop.
Oh, shoot. Wow. Okay. Dang, dude.
On Tuesday, I'll be in London presenting After the Creator Economy book. So if you're interested in that, like DM me or just email me, austin@metalabel.xyz. And it's at Protein, or just show up. I think it's only for members, but like if you've made it this far through this Twitch stream, then you deserve a spot. So like, just let me know. Yeah, so those are the two things I would shout out. And then you just sign up for the Metalabel newsletter. Also collect one of the Songcamp open editions on Metalabel right now too. I think those are still available. So like collect one of those.
Yeah, they're still available. I think minting closes on Sunday, I believe. It's at songcamp.metalabel.app. Yeah. Where can people follow you on Twitter? I know that you're at Austin Robey _ right?
Yeah. I'd say Twitter.
Yeah.
That's the only place I think.
Okay, sick.
There's no newsletter. There's no stack. So just Twitter is fine.
Yeah, keeping it simple. Yeah, for sure. Austin, dude, I know that it's like past midnight where you're at right now. I truly appreciate you coming in as a guest, and also as a friend. I certainly learned a lot from you, and certainly hit you up if I have anything that I am thinking about. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge, your insight on things, and your experience. And so thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for just the invite. Again, talk a lot about how much I appreciate and am inspired by Songcamp, and I'm looking forward to meeting in person, I guess, next month.
Yes. NFT NYC. Let's go. Awesome. Cool. Well, that's it for today. Thank you all for tuning in. I just wanted to give a shout out to everyone who tuned in the chats. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I'll see you guys on the internet. Peace out, everyone.
See y'all.